Hi there. I just saw the picture that precedes this. It's pretty bad. I'm tired of looking at myself in the camera, to be very honest. Okay, today is Thursday, May 14th. It is Dance Like a Chicken Day, and it is Rachel's birthday and Rachel's dad's birthday. So happy birthday to the Case people. This is the fourth town meeting. It's not a chapter. It's I don't know what you'd call it. I don't know what they call it. It's just like a little... It's like a chapter, but it doesn't have a number. Okay, so it's this, and then tomorrow, then we need to move on to something else. Okay, that night, the wind cleaned the smoke from the air. And in the morning, the sky was a brilliant blue, and the air felt tingly. The sunlight was warm, but it had a new quality, thinner and sharper. The season was changing, heading into fall. A messenger from town arrived at the hotel that morning. Doon, who happened to be the first person up, ran into him on the hotel steps. "Tell your people," said the messenger, "that the leaders of Sparks wish to meet with the people of Ember at noon today. They will come to the hotel ballroom." Doon conveyed this message to the next several people he saw, and they told others, and soon everyone knew. At noon, they assembled in the ballroom. Doon stood with his father in the midst of the crowd. All around him, he heard uneasy murmurings. Would this be more bad news? He heard Miss Thorne whisper to someone, "I'm so nervous, I have a stomach ache." He was nervous, too. His hands were damp. At a few minutes after 12, Mary Waters and Wilmer Dent came into the ballroom. With them were 4 men carrying a stretcher on which Doon saw a blanket-draped figure. The stiff gray beard jutting up from the chin told him it was Ben Barlow. Dr. Hester walked beside him, and with her were Mrs. Murdo, Lena, and Poppy. Other townspeople followed, lining up around the edges of the room. Doon recognized storekeepers and team leaders, including Chugger, along with many of the families of Sparks. The Partons were there. He saw Kenny trotting behind his parents. Doon raised his arm and called to Lena, and she came to stand behind him. "Is Ben hurt badly?" Doon whispered. "I think so," Lena whispered back. "The doctor says he was hit in the shoulder." She said the blast almost blew off his arm. "The blast from the weapon." "Listen," said Doon, "I have to tell you something important." And in the next few minutes, as the town leaders and the men carrying Ben mounted the steps and to the stage, he whispered to Lena what he discovered about Tick. Oh, that's right. A lot of this has to do with Tick. "Really?" she kept saying. "Really? How could he? I can't believe it." "And last night," Doon whispered, "I went and found Tick, and I told him I knew, and he said..." Oh, but at that moment, Mary Waters held up her hands for quiet. Doon stopped whispering and turned his eyes to the stage. The men had set the stretcher down and propped one end of it on a chair so that Ben lay on a slant. A bandage covered one of his eyes. He glared out at the audience with the other. When Mary spoke, there was a slight quiver in her deep voice. "We are here to talk of serious matters," she said. "Ben was badly injured yesterday, but he has insisted on coming. We all wish to speak with you face to face." She paused. "First of all, I must tell you this." Doon felt his stomach lurch. "We have realized," Mary said, "that we cannot ask you to leave here. Yay! Your generosity yesterday has helped us remember our own." No one spoke, but the people of Ember glanced at each other and let out breaths of relief. Doon bumped his shoulder against Lena's, and they grinned. "Yesterday," Mary went on, "when our weapon exploded and the fire went out of control, a child of Ember crossed the line that divided us from each other. We are grateful to her for leading the way." "Lena! Lena!" cried a few scattered voices. Lena thought she heard Maddie's voice among them. Doon startled her by yelling, "Lena the Brave!" right in her ear. "I want to say," Mary continued, "that we have made mistakes, and we are sorry for them." Well, listen, this is a really good lesson, boys and girls. We had good intentions at the beginning. We did our best to help you, but when it got hard, we closed our hearts. Wilmer Dent smiled apologetically. "We were worried," he began. Ben interrupted him. His voice was hoarse and weak, and he seemed to be having trouble breathing. Dune strained to hear him. "We were justifiably concerned," he croaked, "about critical food shortages, attempting to ensure the safety of our own people." He made a kind of wheezing, gasping sound. "Understandably," he added. Wilmer shrugged his shoulders, still smiling nervously. "It's just that we were afraid," said Mary. "We were afraid. Let us say it right out. We were afraid that you would ruin everything for us. We were almost on the edge of prosperity. We feared that you would push us back into deprivation." There was a silence then in which no one knew what to say. "So we tried to get rid of the problem instead of solving it," Mary went on. "Fortunately, both our plans and yours were thwarted." She stepped forward and gazed out at the crowd. Her eyes met Dune's and held them for a second. "Just last night," she said, "I learned two things that have changed my picture of what has happened here. The first is this: we still don't know who wrote the muddy words on the plaza. We may never know. But the other attacks on the people of Ember, the ugly writings on the walls of the Pioneer, and the poison oak on the doorstep were not carried out by Sparks villagers at all." The Emberites turned to each other with puzzled looks and murmured confusedly, but who would, what does she mean?" "It was young Dune Harrow who explained it to me," said Mary. "I'd like him to explain it to us all, if he will." She nodded to Dune and gestured upward with her hand. So Dune stood up. He told the assembled people the same he told Mary the night before, when he came to her house late in the evening. "It can't be true," someone cried out. Dune thought it was Allie Bright, who had been Tick's right-hand man. "It is true," Dune said. "Tick told me himself last night. He said it was just good strategy. He said he knew there was going to be war, and he needed to raise a strong army. When people are attacked," he said, "they get mad, and angry people are the best warriors, so he decided to make people angry. He told me he got a good idea for how to do it when he saw those muddy words in the plaza." At that, a roar swelled up and filled the ballroom. People shouted, "Where is he?" and twisted around to look for Tick. A few of them began barging through the audience trying to find him. Dune called out, "Wait, listen, he isn't here." The commotion quieted down. People turned toward Dune. "Last night when I talked to him, Tick was stuffing everything he owns into a sack," said Dune. "He told me he was leaving. He said he couldn't live anymore with cowards and traitors. He'd heard a rumor was coming through the village today, and he planned to catch a ride with him. Some others are going too. They're going to the settlement in the far south," Tick said, "where they hope to have a better welcome than they got here." A great clamor greeted this announcement. Some people laughed, some shouted, "Good riddance," and some just grumbled and shook their heads. Finally, Mary raised her hands again and called, "Please, quiet, I have more to say." People grew silent again and listened. "I said that I learned two things," she said. "The second is this. The incident that set off this chain of violent events did not happen as we thought. It was not Dune Harrow who destroyed those crates of tomatoes. This came as no surprise to the people of Ember, who had never believed Dune guilty in the first place. But the villagers at the meeting looked startled. Dune saw Martha Parton flick her eyes toward him, her eyebrows flying upward, and she saw Ordney give him a quizzical look. Behind them, Kenny smiled a sunny smile. "Torrin Crane has taken back the statement he made," Mary said. "He did not, after all, see Dune Harrow throw those tomatoes. He refuses to say who did throw them, but we must make up our own minds about that, right? But I believe we can be sure that it was not a person from Ember." At that, a cheer arose from the crowd, a loud, disorderly cheer, and Dune was so astonished that he nearly fell over. "I've never been that astonished, have you?" Lena grabbed his arm. "I made him write it down on paper," she yelled into his ear. "I took the paper to Mary last night." When the cheering subsided, Mary continued. "We should take note," she said, "of how easy it is to bring out the worst in us. Here's the moral of the story. The actions of a few troubled individuals fanned resentments into violence. Only an accident kept us from murdering each other. She turned around to face Ben, whose head was lolling sideways, his eyes drooping. Ben has something to say now. Ben, are you able? The doctor, standing next to Ben, nudged his shoulder gently, and Ben opened his eyes. Can you make your statement, Ben? Asked Mary. Ben frowned at the ceiling. The audience waited. Finally, he spoke. I have been told, he said, that Doone Harrow. He stopped, frowned again. I wish to thank young man named Doone Harrow, he took a shaky breath, for rescuing foolish nephew. What? thought Doone. What is he talking about? Ben scowled. He appeared to be gathering his strength. Foolish nephew Torrin Crane, he rasped, in the pine tree, who could have been killed. Ben's voice sank to a whisper, and the audience strained to hear, by my foolish actions. Doone stood stunned. Torrin was Ben's nephew? Well, that was a surprise. But it was even more of a surprise to hear Ben almost apologizing for what he'd done. Lena was thumping Doone on the back. Someone behind him cried out, 3 cheers for Doone! And 3 cheers rang out in the ballroom. Doone just stood there, with what he thought was probably a silly smile on his face. Then Mary stepped forward and called for quiet again. Her voice grew steady and businesslike. Now, she said, we must look to our future. You will not get everything you want. Neither will we. All of us will suffer, perhaps even be in danger. There will be more mouths to feed, but more hands to do the work, too. And though we may have a shortage of food, we have no shortage of work. She paused. She smiled a little. Her eyes passed over the people in the room, and Doone felt her gaze almost like a reassuring touch. The main thing, let's see where this ends. Okay. The main thing, she said, is this. We will refuse to be each other's enemies. We will renounce violence, which is so easy to start but so hard to control. We will build a place where we can all live in peace. If we hold to that, everything is possible. Someone clapped. Doone turned around and saw his father clapping with his hands held high in the air. There is so much to be worked out, Mary said. It won't be easy, but we'll talk about it together. She paused for a second, and a change came over her face, the beginning of a smile. One more thing, she said. We will no longer speak of the people of Sparks and the people of Ember. From now on, we are all the people of Sparks. A rustle swept through the crowd. Both Doone and Lena felt a pang of sorrow. To call themselves people of Sparks meant leaving behind the last trace of their old home, its name. The villagers, too, felt a pang. For them, it was a pang of fear. These were their people now? Could they really live peacefully together? But the sorrow and the fear lasted only a few seconds. Everyone was tired of sorrow and fear. Whatever lay ahead, they thought, would probably be better. They were willing to try it. After that, they turned to the practical details. Actually, let's wait there, and then we'll finish that chapter and the last chapter tomorrow. And I'm still waiting to hear people's suggestions. I don't think I can get another copy of the book. And well, I haven't checked because I don't know if Brandon took it out or not. Maybe I'll find out at a meeting tomorrow. So have a good afternoon, everybody. I'll see you at a meeting tomorrow. Miss you.